Some breaking news coming into CNN. U.S. security leaker Edward Snowden may finally have some options on where to go next. Multiple media reports, including Venezuela's official news agency, say that Venezuela's president is offering asylum to Snowden. Reuters reports that Maduro said, quote, "I have decided to offer humanitarian asylum to the young American Edward Snowden so that in the fatherland of Bolivar and Chavez, he can come and live away from the imperial North American persecution." End of quote. Nicaragua is also expressing a willingness to take him in, but under certain circumstances.
My name's Ed Snowden. I'm 29 years old. I work for Booz Allen Hamilton as an infrastructure analyst for NSA in Hawaii.
What are some of the positions that you held previously within the intelligence community?
I've been a systems engineer, systems administrator, senior advisor for the Central Intelligence Agency, solutions consultant, and a telecommunications information systems officer.
Talk a little bit about how the American surveillance state actually functions. Does it target the actions of Americans?
NSA and the intelligence community in general is focused on getting intelligence wherever it can by any means possible that it believes on the grounds of sort of a self-certification that they serve the national interest. Originally, we saw that focus very narrowly tailored as foreign intelligence gathered overseas. Now, increasingly, we see that it's happening domestically. And to do that, the NSA specifically, targets the communications of everyone. It ingests them by default. It collects them in its system, and it filters them, and it analyzes them, and it measures them, and it stores them for periods of time, simply because that's the easiest, most efficient, and most valuable way to achieve these ends. So while they may be intending to target someone associated with a foreign government or someone that they suspect of terrorism, they're collecting your communications to do so. Any analyst at any time can target anyone, any selector, anywhere. Where those communications will be picked up depends on the range of the sensor networks and the authorities that that analyst is empowered with. Not all analysts have the ability to target everything, but I, sitting at my desk, certainly have the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email.
every country in the world, large and small, engages in intelligence gathering. And that is a occasional source of tension, but it's generally practiced within bounds. There is a big difference between China wanting to figure out how can they find out what my talking points are when I'm meeting with the Japanese, which is standard fare, and we try to prevent them from penetrating that, and they try to get that information. There's a big difference between that and a hacker directly connected with the Chinese government or the Chinese military breaking into Apple's software systems to see if they can obtain the designs for the latest Apple product. That's theft, and we can't tolerate that. And so we've had very blunt conversations about this. They understand, I think, that this can adversely affect the fundamentals of the U.S.-China relationship. We don't consider this a side note in our conversations. We think this is central in part because our economic relationship is going to continue to be premised on the fact that the United States is the world's innovator. We have the greatest R&D. We have the greatest entrepreneurial culture. Our value added is at the top of the value chain. And if countries like China are stealing that, that affects our long-term prosperity in a serious way.
It is said also that the reason they do it is that they want to achieve some kind of military parity at some point. And that's a motivating factor.
I'm sure that is.
Let's turn to NSA.
Yeah.
You famously talked about what you called the wrong choice between security and freedom. Mm-hmm. Where do you put what NSA is doing in that balance between security and freedom?
Well,
a false choice is what you called it.
Let me start with the fact that at National Defense University several weeks ago, when most of the focus was around the drone program and my plans in Afghanistan and the need for us to move away from a perpetual war footing, that I specifically said one of the things we need to debate and examine is our surveillance programs, because those were set up right after 9/11. It's now been over a decade, and we have to examine them.
And what should the debate be?
Well, and what I've said, and I continue to believe, is that we don't have to sacrifice our freedom in order to achieve security. That's a false choice. That doesn't mean that there are not trade-offs involved in any given program, any given action that we take. So all of us make a decision that we go through a whole bunch of security at airports, which when we were growing up, that wasn't the case, right? You ran up to the gate.
Exactly.
You know, 5 minutes to catch
there.
the plane, you're running on.
Right. Been there.
And you know, it's been a while since I went through commercial flying, but I gather the experience is not the same
It
anymore,
has not.
Right?
It's gotten worse.
Okay, right. And so that's a trade-off we make. The same way we make a trade-off about drunk driving. We say occasionally there are going to be checkpoints. They may be intrusive. To say there's a trade-off doesn't mean somehow that we've abandoned freedom. I don't think anybody says we're no longer free because we have checkpoints at airports.
But there is a balance here.
But there is a balance. So I'm going to get to your question. The way I view it, my job is both to protect the American people and to protect the American way of life, which includes our privacy. And so every program that we engage in, what I've said is let's examine and make sure that we're making the right trade-offs. Now, with respect to the NSA, a government agency that has been in the intelligence gathering business for a very long time.
Bigger and better than everybody else.
Bigger and better than everybody else. And we should take pride in that because they're extraordinary professionals. They're dedicated to keeping the American people safe. What I can say unequivocally is that if you are a U.S. person, the NSA cannot listen to your telephone calls, and the NSA cannot target your emails.
And have not.
And have not. They cannot and have not by law and by rule, and unless they, and usually it wouldn't be they, it would be the FBI, go to a court and obtain a warrant and seek probable cause. The same way it's always been. The same way when we were growing up and we were watching movies, you want to go set up a wiretap, you got to go to a judge, show probable cause, and then the judge looks at the...
But have any of those been turned down,
cause.
all the requests to FISA courts, have they been turned down at all?
Let me finish here, Charlie, because I want to make sure this debate has gotten cloudy very quickly.
Exactly.
All right? So, point number one, if you're a U.S. person, then NSA is not listening to your phone calls, and it's not targeting your emails unless it's getting an individualized court order. That's the existing rule. There are two programs that were revealed by Mr. Snowden, allegedly, since there's a criminal investigation taking place, and that caused all the ruckus. Program number one, called the 2015 program. What that does is it gets data from the service providers, like a Verizon, in bulk. And basically, you have call pairs. You have my telephone number connecting with your telephone number. There are no names. There's no content in that database. All it is the number pairs, when those calls took place, how long they took place. So that database is sitting there. Now, if the NSA, through some other sources, maybe through the FBI, maybe through a tip that went to the CIA, maybe through the NYPD, gets a number that where there's a reasonable, articulable suspicion that this might involve foreign terrorist activity related to Al-Qaeda and some other international terrorist actors, then what the NSA can do is it can query that database to see, does this number pop up? Did they make any other calls? And if they did, those calls will be spit out, a report will be produced, it will be turned over to the FBI. At no point is any content revealed because there's no content in the database.
So I hear you saying I have no problem with what NSA has been doing.
Well, let me finish, because I don't. So what happens then is that the FBI, if in fact it now wants to get content, if in fact it wants to start tapping that phone, it's got to go to the FISA court with probable cause and ask for a warrant.
But has FISA courts turned down any request?
Because, first of all, Charlie, the number of requests are surprisingly small, number one. Number two, folks don't go with a query unless they've got a pretty good suspicion.
Should this be transparent in some way?
It is transparent. That's why we set up the FISA court. Okay. Look, the whole point of my concern before I was president, because some people say, well, Obama was this raving liberal before, now he's, Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney sometimes says, yeah, he took it all lock, stock, and barrel. My concern has always been not that we shouldn't do intelligence gathering to prevent terrorism, but rather, are we setting up a systems of checks and balances? So on this telephone program, you've got a federal court with independent federal judges overseeing the entire program, and you've got Congress overseeing the program, not just the Intelligence Committee, not just the Judiciary Committee, but all of Congress had available to it before the last reauthorization exactly how this program works. Now, one last point I want to make, because what you'll hear is people say, okay, we have no evidence that it has been abused so far. And they say, let's even grant that Obama's not abusing it. There are all these processes, DOJ is examining it, it's being audited, it's being renewed periodically, etc. The very fact that there's all this data in bulk, it has the enormous potential for abuse, because they'll say, you can, when you start looking at metadata, even if you don't know the names, you can match it up. If there's a call to an oncologist and it's a call to a lawyer, and you can pair that up and figure out maybe this person's dying and they're writing their will, and you can yield all this information. All of that is true, except for the fact that for the government under the program right now to do that, it would be illegal. We would not be allowed to do that.
So what are you going to change? Are you going to issue any kind of instructions to the Director of National Intelligence, Mr. Clapper, and say, I want you to change it at least in this way?
Here's what we need to do. But before I say that, and I know that we're running out of time, but I want to make sure I get very clear on this, because there's been a lot of misinformation out there. There is a second program called the 702 program. And what that does is that does not apply to any U.S. person. It has to be a foreign entity. It can only be narrowly related to counterterrorism, weapons proliferation, cyber hacking or attacks, and a select number of identifiers, phone numbers, emails, etc. Those, and the process has all been approved by the courts, you can send to providers, the Yahoos or the Googles, what have you, and in the same way that you'd present essentially a warrant. And what will happen then is that you there can obtain content. But again, that does not apply to U.S. persons, and it's only in these very narrow bands. So you asked, what should we do?
Right.
What I've said is that what is a legitimate concern, a legitimate critique, is that because these are classified programs, even though we have all these systems of checks and balances, Congress is overseeing it, federal courts are overseeing it, despite all that, the public may not fully know, and that can make the public kind of nervous, right? Because they say, well, Obama says it's okay, or Congress says it's okay. I don't know who this judge is. I'm nervous about it. What I've asked the intelligence community to do is see how much of this we can declassify without further compromising the program, number one. And they are in that process of doing so now. So that everything that I'm describing to you today, people, the public, newspapers, et cetera, can look at, because frankly, if people are making judgments just based on these slides that have been leaked, they're not getting the complete story. Number two, I've stood up a privacy and civil liberties oversight board made up of independent citizens, including some fierce civil libertarians. I'll be meeting with them. And what I want to do is to set up and structure a national conversation, not only about these two programs, but also about the general problem of these big data sets, because this is not going to be restricted to government entities.
Let me just ask you this.
Yeah.
If someone leaks all this information about NSA surveillance, as Mr. Snowden did, did it cause national security damage to the United States, and therefore should he be prosecuted?
I'm not going to comment on prosecutions.
Okay.
The case has been referred to the DOJ for criminal investigation.
And possible extradition.
And possible extradition. I will leave it up to them to
so what's
answer
your
those
fear?
questions.
What's your fear about this?
Look, we have to make decisions about how much classified information and how much covert activity we are willing to tolerate as a society. And, you know, we could not have carried off the bin Laden raid if it was on the front page of the papers. I think everybody understands that, right? So that would be
of course but I don't understand what the relevance of that is.
Well, no. The reason I'm saying that is that we're going to have to find ways where the public has an assurance that there are checks and balances in place, that they have enough information about how we operate, that they know that their phone calls aren't being listened into, their text messages aren't being monitored, their emails are not being read by some big brother somewhere. They've got to feel that confidence, and that it is not potentially subject to abuse because there are sufficient checks and balances on it, while still preserving our capacity to act against folks who are trying to do us harm. And it's not just terrorists. We already talked about cyber theft. We already talked about potentially critical infrastructure that could be compromised. You know, there were a handful of yokels up in New York who stole $45 million out of ATMs over the course of, I think it was 18 hours. And the public expects me and the Justice Department and others to protect them from those things, to make sure that their bank accounts aren't being compromised, their medical records aren't being compromised. All that stuff requires the government to have some capacity to engage with the private sector and to have
we ought to have a debate about it all.
So we've got to have a debate about it.
Okay.
Judge, how would you describe this man?
I would describe this man as an American hero, as a person willing to risk life, limb, and liberty in order to expose to the American people one of the most extraordinary violations of American principles, value judgments, and the Constitution itself in all of our history. A person so familiar with the intelligence community, as you heard from the excerpts that you just played. He's aware of the personal danger to himself. He knows of the likelihood of prosecution, but he also understands that the government listening to half the country is not what was bargained for when statutes were enacted in the days and weeks after 9/11.
Greetings, citizens of the world. We are anonymous. For many years now, we have warned the citizens of the world about the threats that government pose to the freedoms of the internet. Over this period of time, many people have woken up to the lies told by government officials and now understand the importance of keeping the internet open and free for all to use.
The events that have transpired over the recent days have proven, indisputably, that the governments of the United States and the United Kingdom are trying with all effort possible to monitor the internet. You might ask us, if not to fight terrorism, what are they looking for? The governments of the world are corrupted to the core, by greed and lust, intoxicated by power. They fear losing this power to the people. Let us look at this secret spy system PRISM, and its apparent effectiveness. It has failed to stop terrorism, but has succeeded in monitoring everyone in the world, even law-abiding citizens. It is true that there are evil people in this world who must be watched to ensure the safety of others, but it is simply immoral and unethical to blanket monitor everyone worldwide, assuming that everyone must be guilty of something.
Edward Snowden is a true hero of the people worldwide for revealing this. In stepping forward to bring us the horrifying truth about the draconian states secretly operating, he has put his life on the line. He has given up his job with the government. He has lost his family and loved ones. He now risks extradition and life sentencing to prison, merely for telling us that each and every one of us is being watched, monitored, documented, recorded and categorized.
The fact that companies like Microsoft, Facebook, and Google are involved means that a significant amount of the internet, as we know it, is under inspection. The right to privacy has been violated. People are in greater danger from this surveillance system than they are from terrorism, because the terrorists have not been stopped.
What we are witnessing is the hand of the government and corporate greed extending over the internet. A smear campaign is beginning against Snowden now. This is to be expected. When government is threatened with the loss of power or control, they will use any means required to ensure that the view of the public supports them, instead of the evidence which has come to light. This is done through the media. Already they are calling Edward Snowden a traitor, a supporter of terrorism, or even just creating doubt over his motives. These are common methods seen used against every person who has ever revealed the truth against the state.
The corporations which have been revealed as taking part in PRISM are now scrambling to defend their names, releasing so-called reassurance on why their users' privacy is important. You must ask yourself, if they had done nothing wrong, they would not go to such extreme lengths to change public perception. It is up to us, the people, to see through these lies being told. We must stand with Edward Snowden and fight back on all fronts against the Big Brother state.
Many say they have nothing to hide. But this is beside the point. If you have nothing to hide, why should you be watched? If someone broke into your home and read through your documents and private data, you would feel violated and angered. Why should your digital information be exempt from this? The only difference with online spying is that you remain unaware that it is happening. Otherwise you would become just as angered towards it. And this is why governments fight to keep us from knowing the truth. You only have to scratch the surface before the lies become visible.
Citizens of the world, users of the internet, show your support for Edward Snowden. Edward Snowden is now under the protection of Anonymous worldwide. We are all Edward Snowden now. We urge you to remain peaceful, but to rise. Now is the time to say enough. We call for massive disobedience towards the Big Brother state. We invite you to be anonymous. We must act together worldwide for the cause of internet privacy. Anonymous has no leader, no ranking, and no single means of communication. We are spread of many mediums and languages. Join with us for the freedom of the internet. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
Hello, my friends. We are anonymous. If you are listening to this, then you are probably aware of your surroundings. If you are listening to this, you are the resistance. We have been watching the world as events unfold around you, and truth be told, we are highly displeased. The monstrosities carried out by governments all over the world on a daily basis is growing old, and we are here to bring these vile acts to light. If you are afraid of your government, or afraid to wake up in the morning to a war-torn city, whether you're afraid of your life being lost, because you've been tossed into pointless wars fighting for someone you will never meet or who will never care about you but the money he takes because of you, then you, my friend, are anonymous. If you are tired of watching the world, our only home, be ripped to shreds for an illusion of riches based on paper with false value placed upon it, then you, my friend, are anonymous. We are humans, and value human life. This is why you, one watching this video, is here today. You want something more to life than to be born, grow up, make money, retire, and die, and all for nothing. What have you accomplished? What have you done then, except become like the other 8 billion people who are going through the same thing? My friend, we know this is why you seek us. Because you, like most of the people around you, want change for the better. You want compassion. You want caring. You want less value on human possession and more value on human life. My friend, we know this is why you seek to become anonymous. It is because the idea of anonymous burns inside you like fire not known to this world. The idea of anonymous is the idea of freedom. We are not just one single person, group, or community who call ourselves anonymous. We are not just hackers like the media says and has corrupted you with it. We are you. We are your neighbors. We are your fathers and your mothers. We are your sons and your daughters. We are your aunts and we are your uncles. Your sisters and your brothers. We are the poor unemployed man who is looking for his purpose in life and the food to put on his family's table, as well as the lawyer who fights for the accused under the court of law. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forgive. We are united, and no one can divide us. Expect us.
Greetings to our brave protesters in the world. Good job, and let we all join the rallies and fight against corruption. We are anonymous, from OpenSA.
Greetings, NSA. Thanks to the actions of Edward Snowden, the world is now aware of your absurdly intrusive and elaborate monitoring agenda. Every Verizon user, every Facebook, LinkedIn, Google Plus and Twitter account, every Yahoo, Bing and Google search result, every Microsoft Windows, Google Chrome and Apple Mac operating system, every Safari, Chrome and Internet Explorer web browser, every PayPal and Google Wallet transaction, every Gmail, Outlook and Yahoo email, every bit of content in iCloud, Dropbox, Drive and SkyDrive, every AOL, Yahoo, Messenger and Google Talk instant message, every Skype, FaceTime, Google Hangouts and Talk Call, every Flickr, Instagram, Picasa, Tumblr, YouTube Media. All are victims to your illegitimate counter-terrorism measures. Spying on over 120 million people, including innocent citizens of your own nations, was not a good idea, as you will come to understand soon enough. We will now be commencing Operation National Security Agency, in retaliation of your disrespect for the privacy of people worldwide. You cannot expect to covertly spy on people who have done nothing wrong, under the guise of preemptively fighting terrorism, when you failed to stop the Boston bombing and expect consent. You are of no use to anyone except those in power and who wish to keep it, at the expense of every citizen's privacy, that they are entitled to under the Constitution, of which you show no respect for. NSA will be unforgiving in its work and will leave no stone unturned, just as you do for all of us. As of this moment, people around the world are beginning to wake up, and consequently, stand up to your data mining agenda. You will soon understand for yourselves what it is like to be spied on and your personal information be stored, available for all to gaze upon. We are officially calling on all citizens of the internet, all anonymous participants and all activists to take to their computers, take to their streets and take to all available outlets to let their voices be heard on this issue. Violations like this will not be treated with apathy. Anonymous has been proven to be a powerful force for good, and even more so, a nemesis to tyranny and injustice. You thought you could infringe on our privacy. You thought you could wiretap people who have no reason to be observed. But best of all, you thought you could get away with all of it. The NSA will lose the game. All your base will belong to us. We are anonymous, we are legion, we do not forgive, we do not forget, expect us.
these ends. So while they may be intending to target someone associated with a foreign government or someone that they suspect of terrorism, they're collecting your communications to do so. Any analyst at any time can target anyone, any selector anywhere. Where those communications will be picked up depends on the range of the sensor networks and the authorities that that analyst is empowered with. Not all analysts have the ability to target everything, but I, sitting at my desk, certainly had the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email.
Talk a little bit about how the American surveillance state actually functions. Does it target the actions of Americans?
NSA and the intelligence community in general is focused on getting intelligence wherever it can by any means possible that it believes, on the grounds of sort of a self-certification, that they serve the national interest. Originally, we saw that focus very narrowly tailored as foreign intelligence gathered overseas. Now, increasingly, we see that it's happening domestically. And to do that, the NSA specifically targets the communications of everyone. It ingests them by default. It collects them in its system, and it filters them, and it analyzes them, and it measures them, and it stores them for periods of time, simply because that's the easiest, most efficient, and most valuable way to achieve. My name's Ed Snowden. I'm 29 years old. I work for Booz Allen Hamilton as an infrastructure analyst for NSA in Hawaii.
What are some of the positions that you held previously within the intelligence community?
I've been a systems engineer, systems administrator, senior advisor for the Central Intelligence Agency, solutions consultant, and a telecommunications information systems officer.
Some breaking news coming into CNN. U.S. security leaker Edward Snowden may finally have some options on where to go next. Multiple media reports, including Venezuela's official news agency, say that Venezuela's president is offering asylum to Snowden. Reuters reports that Maduro said, quote, "I have decided to offer humanitarian asylum to the young American Edward Snowden so that in the fatherland of Bolivar and Chavez, he can come and live away from the imperial North American persecution." End of quote. Nicaragua is also expressing a willingness to take him in. but under certain circumstances.